Okay, everyone. So, welcome back to the fourth episode of Vanguard. So, Davey, what's in the news recently?
So during the Super Bowl, Trump made a post about ending the penny. He said they're going to end the penny because it costs over 2 cents to make. And I mean, it just doesn't make sense to make them. So that's the latest.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, who uses the penny anyway? Unless it's used for loose change, pennies are annoying. I've probably got 200 floating around in the drawers of my desk right now. It's pretty useless other than trading back in for a quarter.
Even 200, like that's a large number, but that's $2 if you trade it in.
Yeah.
So it's almost not even worth your time to save them.
Yeah.
It feels like at this point they're more of an inconvenience than a real currency because what's the difference between 5 and 7 cents? Like that's a 2 cent difference. 2 cents is on a large scale. Yeah, it's going to make a difference. For example, if you pay 2 extra cents in taxes, if everyone does that every purchase, it's going to add up over time for sales tax. But
Yeah.
overall, the penny doesn't make a huge impact.
True. Yeah. Well, and I believe the nickel costs a crazy amount to make. I believe it costs like 13 or 14 cents comparatively. So I think the nickel should possibly get cut too. I could see a bigger argument for the nickel simply because it's a little more. It's a little bigger chunk of change. But overall, given the fact that $1 isn't what it used to be, can we even bother to keep the penny? Because quite honestly, I see no reason to keep a piece of money that not many people even use these days, especially with electronic transfers of money.
Yeah, exactly. I think the nickel would be worth keeping just because of the fact that it's a lot more relevant. Even though 5 cents isn't really that much, overall, it makes a lot bigger of a difference than the penny does. But I think we could make it in a cheaper way. I'm not entirely sure why we wouldn't change up the way we make it.
Yeah.
If a nickel's worth 5 cents, I think it makes perfect sense, no pun intended, to make it in a way that cost 5 cents.
True. Yeah. I mean, it is difficult simply from the entire coin system. Every single piece of change has its own weight, its own metal that it uses. And so whenever people deposit this change into vending machines, the machines will actually wait and figure out what change it is based off of its weight, its metal type, and so on. And so if you were to change the change, there would have to be enormous other alterations to the system. So it would be inconvenient, to say the least, to change how it's done.
You have to weigh what's really worth it. Like, is it worth losing so much money every nickel you make? And I guess that's the politician's decision overall.
Yeah.
So the USAID just shut down.
Okay.
And that's a big controversy. A lot of people are mad at Trump for that.
So whenever they shut down the USAID, why exactly was it really controversial? I mean, we've heard about all sorts of weird stories about how they funded transgender surgery in places like Guatemala and Venezuela. Why exactly is this such a big issue? Is it just these government jobs were thought to be protected by the deep state? Why exactly is this such a controversial topic?
Well, I mean, they did just shut down an entire government agency, and the government agency was devoted to helping foreign affairs and helping people in other countries. And I mean, in theory, that's a good cause. But when you look at what they were actually doing, Elon Musk's analogy was he didn't find an apple with a worm in it, he just found a pile of worms.
Okay.
Like, there was nothing worth saving in the USAID that wasn't so done in by woke culture. Elon Musk also said there was stuff in there that was literally anti-American or supporting terrorists. It was just so far gone. And that's why right supports shutting it down. The controversy is it is a government agency devoted to helping our relationship with others and helping other countries. So in the one sense, it's a thing with a good cause. It wasn't working.
Okay. So I guess the basic premise then would be what works and what doesn't, and we simply say, okay, this doesn't work. I think, too, the left was going to throw a fit over any government agency we shut down simply because we are shutting down a government agency, and they kind of assumed from past iterations of government or administrations that their agencies were safe. They assumed that once they were in place, they were permanently in place. And now that we're cutting back some of that extra fat from the government, it's now much more vulnerable to be in one of those places. And I think they're realizing that it's not going to be a free ride anymore. And the American people are actually going to be informed on what the government is spending money on.
And the USAID was a department that was radically woke. That's why it was so bad in Elon Musk's opinion. It was just pushing the woke agenda so hard, and that's where pretty much all the money was going to. And so those on the left who support that woke agenda, I mean, shutting down the agency, they were shutting down something good in their opinions. And by shutting down a government agency, that's a big deal, and they can make a big deal out of that.
Okay, so Trump had a press conference with Benjamin Netanyahu. What exactly did they talk about, and what exactly was the end result of that press conference?
Well, do you know much about this press conference? How much do you know about it?
I know a little bit about it, but I do know that what Trump plans on doing with Gaza, what Trump sees as the end result. I mean, it's clear Israel has to be able to defend itself. And if that is not being met, then something's got to happen. And I believe that Trump wants to take over the Gaza Strip and basically make the U.S. a protectorate of that. And basically, we're to keep the Israelis safe. Why Israel doesn't take the Gaza Strip and actually do that, I don't know. Do you?
No, I actually don't. I haven't heard that perspective on it.
Okay, yeah. Personally, I wish we would stay out of it. It's Israel's war. Let them fight it. Let them do what they want. Don't get the U.S. involved. We've got our hands in so many places that shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I feel like this kind of brings up, Trump has so many plans to take foreign territories, and I'm excited about them. I think we have great trade opportunities by controlling Greenland, controlling the Panama Canal. I think controlling the Gaza Strip would be good for us. But what happens when we do all of them? And that's the real question I'm wondering right now, because that is a ton of work on America's hands to gain control of all of them.
Yeah.
And more than that, I want America to be seen as powerful, but I don't want them to be seen as a threat. I don't want other countries to look down on us as, say, they do Russia, China, North Korea, some power like that.
Yeah.
And I think by taking a bunch of countries, or even just taking control over a lot of countries, I think we're kind of putting ourselves in the danger zone of being perceived as hostile.
I agree. And it's not so much about America being a threat as it is, there's a difference between being powerful and being a threat. You can be very, very powerful and not be a threat simply because America is often known as the sleeping giant. I don't want to be known as the giant who's fully awake and angry at everyone. It's a lot more simple if we say, if you bother us, we're going to make sure that you pay. We don't necessarily want to take over other countries just because it's strategically the right thing to do. It's got to be a completely honest way of taking over the countries, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's some good trade advantage that will come with that. But you have to balance your relationship with other countries and make sure you're staying on good terms with all these countries, because it's the trade with the other countries that you're getting the advantages with. And when you get rid of that, you're in a lot of danger.
Yeah, and it's not just danger from other countries and other countries being worried about you. It's also, to some degree, a threat for yourself, because whenever any one country gets too big, they automatically have a sort of mentality, because we're the most powerful, we can do what we want. And so, while I don't appreciate China and Russia, they do to some degree keep America in check, in a sense that now America has to be a free country because of them. There has to be that balance. And so because America is seen as a country where freedom reigns, it allows so much more ability to rally around America. And whenever you take that out, and whenever America is the only powerful country, it makes it a lot harder to rally around them. And so as a free country, we would stand alone.
So what do you think about Trump's plan to move everyone in Gaza to Egypt and Jordan?
Well, for one thing, I appreciate them being moved out of Gaza. On the other hand, it really doesn't solve the problem of what do you do with Gaza? Because that's a million people. It's not just like 500 people that you're saying, hey, can you please leave? This is 1 million people. This is their home, whether by relocation or having lived there for centuries. It is their home. And so I think that shouldn't be taken lightly. But at the same time, Israel does have a country to defend. And whenever you see an area such as Gaza repeatedly over and over attack Israel and cause Israel harm, you almost don't have a choice. And so the decision to relocate people from Gaza to Egypt or Jordan, it really, I think, would be a game changer, because now all of those people from Gaza actually have a country now. Whether or not Israel would benefit from that, I don't know. And whether or not Egypt or Jordan would even allow that, that is another question.
Yeah, and I mean, both their leaders aren't really interested in taking in a whole bunch of Gaza immigrants, but Trump does have a lot of power, and I think if he really decided to, he could move them. I just don't know how good it would be.
Yeah.
So, Canada and Mexico gave in and are sending 10,000 troops each to protect their borders. What do you think of that?
Well, whenever I first heard of it, I thought, great, now they'll actually defend or keep in their own people from our borders. But then I thought, okay, well, that's great that they're doing it, but are they actually going to be stopping cartels, or specifically the troops from Mexico? And are they actually going to be a deterrent, or would it have been better that we actually sent our own troops there to protect our border? I mean, we do have over 1,500 troops there right now, but it might have been better for us to send our own troops. Of course, I do appreciate the gesture that they are doing this for, and to simply say, hey, we understand you're obviously a sovereign country and you have a right to defend your border. We're going to help with that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, on the one hand, that is a thought, but on the other, it is Donald Trump in office.
Yeah.
I think if they don't do a good job, he will do something about it. I don't think they can get away with just doing the motions. I think they're going to actually have to do something, or else face the consequences of not actually doing something.
Mm-hmm. And I mean,
yeah,
you do raise a really good point. Trump is Trump, and he's changed the dynamics of how America's foreign policy has worked. In the matter of about 2 weeks, he's changed American foreign policy more than probably the past 2 decades at this point. Obviously, 9/11 changed quite a bit, but American foreign policy, I think, will forever now be changed, because with Trump telling countries such as Canada and Mexico, hey, I'm going to put tariffs on you guys unless you actually do something, and them complying shows America how much power America really has. And so I think foreign relations have changed, and I don't know what exactly that means for the future, but that means that a lot of countries, I think, will possibly comply with America's demands.
I guess Canada at least seems to have kind of a fearful aspect towards America now. So this week, Justin Trudeau was caught on a hot mic talking about how Trump's threats to take over Canada were real. They were said jokingly, but he's genuinely concerned about it.
Interesting. Yeah, and I mean, Trump has apparently, over the Super Bowl interview, he commented that he would like Canada to be the 51st state. I'm not necessarily fond of that happening, but apparently it's a distinct possibility, or at least in Trump's mind. I guess on the topic of foreign nations and immigration, Guantanamo Bay is now officially open and taking in illegal immigrants. So just as a side note, that's pretty awesome.
Guantanamo Bay is built for the immigrants that are too dangerous to even send back to their own countries, because if we say send a crazy dangerous criminal back to Cuba and he finds his way back to America, we don't want to take that risk, which is why Trump has built Guantanamo Bay. It can hold massive amounts of violent criminals, and that is now functional. We sent our first people over, which is pretty exciting, and that is increasing the capacity that we can hold illegal immigrants, which is great, because at this rate, we're going to fill up our illegal immigrant holding places very quickly.
Indeed.
Actually, I saw one statistic that said ICE under Trump's administration has got 11,000 illegal immigrants already.
Wow.
And under Joe Biden's administration last year, ICE got 33,000 total. And so in 18 days, Trump has captured a third of what Joe Biden did last year. So it's a pretty amazing statistic.
Yeah, I guess we could do some simple mathematics. If you look at 11,000, that's approximately a third. So if you take 2 weeks and multiply that by 3, that's 6 weeks. So that's basically 52 sixths multiplied by 11,000 is how many illegal immigrants. That would be 100,000 immigrants that he will capture. So that's pretty exciting. But
that's a pretty large amount.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. And while we have way more than 100,000 in the U.S., it at least sends a signal that America is taking border security and illegal immigration seriously. And that will, 1, slow the flow, and 2, that will cause those who are in this country illegally to think twice about committing a murder or actually trying to do an armed robbery or any type of criminal activities whatsoever, simply because they realize, hey, I might actually go to jail this time, or I might not be able to come back into the U.S. if I get captured and am actually sent back out of the country. And so that's pretty exciting from that standpoint too, is it's sending a warning to those who are remaining.
ICE has said they're now targeting all of the criminal illegal immigrants first, the ones who have committed some kind of crime, specifically the violent ones, and that also sends the signal. So what do you think about Trump revoking Biden's security clearance?
Well, for one thing, I think it's probably necessary, simply from a security standpoint. On the other hand, I don't foresee him actually needing to access classified documents again, which, one, obviously gives a good reason to shutting down his security clearance, and simultaneously brings up a question of, why does he need a security clearance taken down? I mean, if you're not going to use it, why revoke it? But at the same time, I could see the argument, if you're not going to use it, why have it? So I think it's very important that security is maintained. And quite frankly, if Biden were to access those secure documents, he is a liability.
Yeah, and I would say it's more of a gesture than anything. I wouldn't expect Biden to misuse his security clearance. For safety's sake. I'm kind of glad he has his security clearance revoked. But I think it's more of a gesture on Trump's part, because Biden did the same thing to Trump when Trump left office.
That's true.
And, I mean, Biden is, according to that test, mentally incompetent.
Yeah. Robert Hur referred to Joe Biden as a senile old man,
which is a pretty big statement against the President of the United States.
Yeah.
And my real question is, why was he still president of the United States after that came out, saying that he wasn't mentally fit? But that's a whole nother topic.
Yeah.
And he's out now. So
yes.
Thank goodness.
Yes, indeed. Well, I think that just about wraps up today's episode. So thanks for tuning in. And Davey, any closing thoughts?
Nope.
Well, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.